Hi guys, this week we're going to talk about from the very beginning. If you're a brand new writer and you want to know how to start screenwriting, let's get started. This episode might be a little bit boring for people that have already been writing for a while, already know a bit about screenwriting, but it's also not real bad to go back over your basics. Now the first thing, if you're brand new to screenwriting, this was triggered off by someone on Reddit who said, I want to be a screenwriter. That is an important distinction between I've got a great idea for a story, or I want to tell my story, to I want to be a screenwriter. If you want to be a screenwriter, it means you're going to tell more than one story in your lifetime, and that is so important. You're going to learn a craft of screenwriting and be able to tell multiple stories, multiple aspects across multiple times. People who say, I've got this great idea, they don't want to be a screenwriter. They're better off hiring a screenwriter and then working with that person to get your great idea out there. We want to tell your story through a writer. Because if you want to be a screenwriter, you want to learn the craft, and that's going to be a lifelong learning experience, a lifelong journey. And the less there is to learn, the harder those little finite edge things that are there to learn. Great musicians will say, I used to play a certain way, and then I went and watched so-and-so perform, and it changed the way I thought about music. And this is the same thing. If you're going to learn your craft, you're going to find you accelerate a lot, then you learn less, and you learn less because there's less to learn and there's more to polish. That was a side note, but let's get into the idea. The first thing you may want to do is have an idea. And this is going to be the truth, and it's going to hurt. But the first thing you ever write is probably going to be, by your own assessment in the future, garbage. It's not going to be very good. You're going to do all the things that later on when you get your voice, you're going to hate. So if there's one story that's really precious to you, don't make it your first screenplay, or know that in the future you're going to come back and rewrite it and completely have a second run at it. But let's say we're going to write your favourite story to start with. You've got to figure out what sort of story it is. It may not be a movie. It may be a fantastic book. It might be a poem, a novella. It could be a song. It may not be a movie. A movie has a very specific type of story. A lot of it is visual. A lot of it is told through people's movements, through their actions, through journey, through things that happen. It's not introspective. It's not about someone's struggle to overcome their own personality and build a stronger self-worth so they can ask that girl to marry them. The only action is ask that girl to marry them. All that other stuff is really hard to show in a series of actions. If you went past that first point, a person asks someone to marry someone and they get rejected, and they spend time learning about themselves. They go off to war, they go help the homeless, they do something that they think is just going to separate them from their heartbreak, and it becomes the learning experience, and they become a better person. And when they come back, they might now be the person the other person would want to marry, or they've realized they didn't really want to marry that person. That was what they were going to use to prove their self-worth. It can be those sorts of stories, but through the series of events that show them changing, that show them learning. You have an experience here, and then you have that same experience later on. You see a different reaction to it so the audience can see that they've learned. But if it's just all introspection, that's a novel. So first you have to learn if your story is a movie and start thinking about it in visual terms. They could do this, they could visit that person. How would we show that? How would we explain that to someone visually or in a conversation? Those are the sorts of things. There's hundreds of books, and this is a little bit of an ad for myself. This book up here, up there, yeah, we'll go that way, up here, is Tools Not Rules. And it's a very important book, I think, for people that's starting out and for anywhere in their career. There is hundreds of books, and just Google The Hero's Journey, and you'll get a 3 or 4 page book, download, print it out, whatever, that explains all the beats. If you're into that sort of thing, if you're into that sort of formula, and it's not a bad way to learn, but you'll outgrow it immediately. A lot of people are married to these formulas. Don't get married to these formulas. If you get this book, it's under $10. It gives you tools. It explains to you how to understand how people think. Tools based on my experience when I was an intelligence analyst, my business career, the businesses I've built and that sort of thing. How you assess gangs, worlds, scenarios, and they're sort of been reverse engineered to help you as a writer. If you want to build a world, there's a thing called the Pestel analysis, which you use in intelligence and you also use in business to talk about a society or a group and how it's going to influence the decisions you make. Well, if we reverse engineer that tool and say, now you can use that analysis to build a world, and that world will make sense, and the decisions in that world will make sense, and you'll know how the government operates. It's a very simple tool, 7 questions. Then there's things like oppositional matrices, how the antagonist sees himself, how the protagonist sees herself, how the protagonist sees the antagonist, and so forth. It's 50 pages or so of all these tools and explanations, and at the end we show how all the tools interact and we write a very small film together. So that's Tools Not Rules, and under $10, it's a great resource. And like, this is a little bit of an ad just now for that book because it's my book. The link will be below, and I think it's a very important book that you can read, gift to people, whatever you want, and it'll get you going. There is lots of books around, to Save the Cats, The Story, all these are based on a thing called the hero's journey. And the hero's journey was Campbell, I think, wrote it back in 1949, so it's nearly 100 years ago. And they've all just taken slight different variations of that. And it's a series of beats. And it starts off with the ordinary world. And then something happens that changes the world. Then your protagonist is sort of nearly drawn into a conflict. They refuse the conflict. And then something happens, they have to join the conflict. And then there's all these prescriptive beats. And that's when you feel you're watching a movie and you go, I've seen this before, I know what's happening. That's when people stick to that formula. Tools Not Rules isn't that. But just if you want to get your feet wet, you want to get a basic of understanding story, just Google the hero's journey. There'll be heaps of documents on Google, 3 or 4 page documents, read it, you'll be fine. That's all you really need. And it'll give you a basic understanding or a structure of a story. So we've already crossed the idea that your story has to be film-like. A lot of people say there has to be a hero's arc. There has to be a change. Your character has to change. People don't change that much. I don't change that much. You don't change that much. People don't change. So maybe the world has to change. The scenario has to change. He may have to take a realization. She may have to take on a new responsibility. She may make a decision to change the world for the better at her own detriment. All those things are possible. But there has to be change, unless there is the old type of story, which is the there and back again, where a person goes on this massive journey and comes back to exactly the same spot. The Hobbit is a bit like that. Bilbo is taken on an adventure with the dwarfs, sees the world. There's wars, there's battles, there's a dragon. He learns about magic. When he comes home, he's just still sitting in his hobbit hole. And that's it. It's a there and back again story. So you've got this idea. You've gone through it. You've realized it can be told visually. Now, how are you going to tell it? What sort of form is it going to take? Is it going to be a there and back again? Is it going to be heroic, where the person has to go and find something, learn something, and change the world? Star Wars is the first Star Wars is a typical hero's journey. Luke is the protagonist. He's stuck in this place. The robots turn up. He takes them off to old Ben. Old Ben says, you can do great things. No, I don't want to do it. There's a refusal of the journey. Comes home. His family's been killed. Now he's going to go off and fight against the Empire. That's the standard hero's journey start. Harry Potter's a bit the same way. All those things follow those sorts of patterns, but you don't have to do those. There's also great films that don't follow those sorts of patterns. Captain America, for instance, he doesn't change. He is always a Boy Scout throughout all those films. The world changes around him. He doesn't change. Even when he was a weakling, he threw himself on a grenade so he would die and other people would survive. He's always been that guy, not when he became the super soldier. So Captain America doesn't change. So You've got to figure out the way you're going to tell your story. You may want to tell it, Christopher Nolan's early films weren't linear. It wasn't this, then this, then this. It was this, then that, then back to this, then back to that, then back to this, and then back to before the beginning. And he gave the people information in a way that told the story more intriguing. And that's what structure is. Structure is the form in which you're giving your people information. So I always outline, and if you're new to screenwriting, like this is for beginners, outline. You don't need a beat sheet. That's if you get those heroes' journeys and say, then he'll do that. Oh, he has to meet a mentor. Okay, he'll meet Harry, and Harry will be an old cop. And then that's going to dictate your story. What I like to do is just put dot points into a document. I'll use a Google Doc so I can do it on my iPad, my phone, or my computer. Dot point. Sally realizes that her boyfriend's cheating. Another dot point will be Sally decides to go on a holiday to mend her broken heart. Another dot point. Sally loses her job. So we don't know where that's going to go. Right? But it's just, I want her to lose her job. I want her to have nothing to come back to. Another dot point. And I just put all my dot points. When I get about 40 of them, maybe 45, I know that's a feature film. And then I can just start cutting and pasting and moving them around. And you begin to say, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would you do that here? I may have to go early, or I may have to go really late. If I move it really late, what does that do for my story? Well, now we've got to build up to it. Okay, how would we build up to it? We'll put a few more dot points in here for different things. Outlining is very important. Learning is very important. That is the most important thing. The one thing you have to do all the time is read screenplays. I still read screenplays. You just keep reading screenplays because when you first start, you'll see the screenplay. You'll say, oh, okay, that's all uppercase. That's a screen header. Okay. There's only 3 lines for a scene director. Oh, okay. Oh, and character director. Oh, okay. And you begin to see the screenplay. After you've read a few and you've written a few yourself and you've thrown them in a drawer or thrown them away or whatever, written a couple of scenes, whatever you do to practice, a bit like guitar, you sit down and start playing things. Once you've done a few of those, then you'll begin to look at, when you're reading screenplays, and go, oh, that was so well set up. I know why they did that now, because several scenes ago they planted that idea in my head, and I've now metabolized that planting in my brain into understanding what this scene means. And you begin to see that, and then you'll begin to see great craft, and you'll begin to see word choice, and you'll begin to see things that I always say, the Jenny Ann scene in Hell or High Water, where he describes that Jenny Ann would have been a cheerleader when she was a teenager. When she was 16, she was gorgeous, but she's put on an extra 50 pounds. It's given her big boobs. She's barely contained, but she's still the cheerleader at heart. And all that gave the actress something to chew on. And it gave us an understanding of how that actress was going to perform that character. So that was very, very important as well. So read great screenplays, understand the story you've got, make sure it can be told visually, and start dot pointing it in so you begin to see what it is. And it'll read like a badly written novella. And then Steve walks across the room, and then Steve does this, and then Harry does that, and then she does this, and he does that, and Mary does this, and Mary does this, and Mary does this, and Mary, and you get, well, it's like 10 scenes of Mary doing stuff. I need to break that up because that's going to be a bit boring. So then you start moving things around, and you're beginning to become a screenwriter, beginning to think visually, you're beginning to see the beats of a story, you're beginning to see the pace, you're beginning to see what's boring, too much of one thing. So outlining is a very important tool for the beginner screenwriter. Dialogue, I'm a big fan of less is more. At the end, I will have a couple of videos, and I'll put video links below of stuff that I've done before. Less dialogue is the better, because, and actors will always say this, some dialogue they just want to say, right? They want to read it out. But neither you or I are Elmore Leonard, because if you're as good as Elmore Leonard or those sorts of guys, you're not watching this video, and if I'm as good as those guys, I'm not making videos. I'm booked solid for the rest of my life. So we can't write dialogue that's going to just be so beautiful to say that actors will just stand there and want to recite it like poetry. Because what we're writing is screenplays, we're not writing poetry. So don't have actors recite. Don't have actors stand there reciting lines, line after line after line after line. Give them acting to do, give them space. People interrupt each other all the time. They talk over each other all the time. People finish sentences for each other. I had one of the episodes I'll link below, a little bit about dialogue. And there was two detectives driving along, and I'm paraphrasing my own work here. But one of them was like, I can't believe another person would do that to another person. That's just one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. And the other detective's like, that's going to stay with you for a while. It sticks with me. I can't believe that someone was so violent. Back to the original detective that goes, I just can't handle it. This detective back to, I need a drink. Let's go to a bar and get okay. Right. And I cut that down to Detective One goes, and the other guy goes, McGinty's, obviously the name of a bar. And the other guy goes, yeah. And it gave room for acting. The distress in the face and the final, you've suggested a bar, I'm defeated by the situation. Yeah. And I'm not a very good actor. You give that to a great actor and it'll just drag all the emotion out of the audience. You just got to give people room to act. So don't overwrite. As a young screenwriter, or as a new screenwriter, as just starting out screenwriter, whatever term you want to use, you will overwrite. You see it on Reddit, you see it on Stage 32, you see it on the Script Revolution forums. People say, I've written my first screenplay, but it's 190 pages, and everyone says it should be between 90 and 120. But I can't cut it down. I can't find a single word I could lose. And I guarantee you could lose nearly all the dialogue.
Am I making any sense at all?
There's a Scriptnotes podcast with Christopher Nolan. And he said that he actually had a go at writing the Dunkirk movie with no dialogue. So there you go. Dunkirk, he believes, could have been done with virtually no dialogue, just acting. So you can get rid of your dialogue. You can cut down on your descriptions. You don't have to go, the room was oak and this and that and blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. You could, if you're describing this room, you could say it's a studio/office with guitars, writing equipment, and just jumbles of junk. 15 words, and people would understand what this looks like. During production meetings, people will say, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean? I wrote The Hostage, and it was originally set in a bar in South Boston. That fell through. I took it back. I ended up selling it to another guy who moved it to a yard that had heavy construction equipment, and we set it inside the workshop. So it needed rewriting, but it had all these cool things like cranes hanging from the roof so we could go back and forth. So we could hang the hostage from chains. It had all these extra bonuses. So don't be too descriptive. Just if for the hostage, you could just say, as long as it's got a bench and it's an abandoned space, and the cops knew they'd taken this guy hostage, and the cops were not going to be caught until they beat a confession out of this guy. That's all that film needed, was that real basic description. It's a room that no one's going to find, that leaves the cops open to do bad things. When you write action, write how the action feels. Don't have to say he punches him and his head turns and then he gets a blow back. And when people say how do you write fight scenes, I always write how they feel. Martial arts will feel like ballet with swords, with pristine movement, no energy expended. It wasn't going to hit a blow. You might have two guys on the floor rumbling and crawling across the ground, scratching, grinding and punching each other as they head towards a gun. You could have two boxers that say they're planted on the mat like mountains, taking blows and hitting blows in a gruesome display of force. How action feels is very important. A room is only needed if it's going to be big and echoey, if it's going to be small, if it's going to be compact. I've just done an episode recently, which I'll put a link below, which is about describing locations. And I show you a picture and I describe it. I show you another picture and I describe it. And it shows how much I overwrite with only 3 lines, because then we go look at Christopher Nolan's Batman. 1 line about that huge bunker. And then we look at Hell or High Water. We look at the casino, like 10 words. And we see how the greats can just go 1 line. So less is always more. Less dialogue, less scene description, less action lines. It's more. It leaves space for acting, it leaves space for an imagination, and you won't cross off someone's thoughts when they're going, oh, I'm thinking this. Oh, no, I've been told something else. I've got to go back and reimagine now. Leave people space to imagine. So you've got your character, you've got your idea, you know that it's visual. You're going to beat it out. You're going to sort of get it in a form, and then you're going to start. Software. Writerduet, if you want to buy it, ta-da! You get 20% off with that code. I get no money, and I've made an agreement. I sent an email to writerduet that if I ever do make money, they're to donate it to a children's hospital, either in Canada, America, Australia, wherever they want to donate it. I'm down with that. I don't want to make money out of that. But you get 20% off buying an annual subscription, monthly subscription, whatever it is, just go over there. But they also give you a free trial where you can have up to 3 scripts in there, which might be enough for you to figure out whether you like writing or not. You pump out 3 screenplays. It's professional. It does everything for you. It's a great bit of software, great bit of kit. I have the iOS app on my iPad, which is where I do most of my writing, believe it or not, as well as the, on my PC or on my phone, wherever I can go, I can write. So use writerduet, you get 3 scripts. By the end of writing 3 screenplays, so you're going to write about 400 pages. At the end of 400 pages, you'll know whether you're addicted or not addicted. And that's the thing. This is the last thing. It's been a bit of a ranty episode. This is the last episode to hopefully get you going, to get your fingers on your keyboard, get you writing little bits of paper, get you, pen on paper type stuff, which is what I do. Remember, there's a few things. You may want to be a writer, but you don't want to write. No. You're not a writer. Find something that brings you joy. If you want to write and you find yourself writing all the time, you will eventually be a writer. You will eventually convince other people to pay you for that writing, whether it be on TV or be in a feature film or in the indie world. I do smaller indies, though I do have an opportunity to do something for TV maybe coming up. You will be a writer if you're addicted to the process of writing, and that's the thing. The process produces the work. If someone comes to you and goes, I've got this great idea, and ideas are like leaf litter, they fall from the sky. People have millions of ideas. An idea is worthless until you, the writer, puts it into beats, puts it onto paper, comes up with the character, comes up with the right character, comes up with the right way of doing it. I start with a question, something like, what would you be willing to do to save a member of your family? So we end up with things like Taken is basically that film. Saving Private Ryan, he looks at that young guy and says, I'm going to save that young guy. And he says to him, be worth this, as he's dying. What would you do to save somebody, whether it be a family member? And then you look at a scenario. Where would be good to do that? An urban, a gangster film, maybe a western, maybe sci-fi. And then you can start to look at that. Well, if it's in sci-fi, what would happen in sci-fi? Well, like Princess Leia, maybe she's been taken and the brother is going to go save her. So there'll be spaceships, or maybe they have to go to another planet. And you'll begin to see things that, well, if he has to die, maybe he has to give himself up as a hostage so she can go free. And then what's that going to mean for her? And you begin to solve the questions. And that's the other thing. When you ask a question, don't answer it. Leave it open to the audience to answer and answer it later. Because there's a few things that have to be in a scene as well. Never have a scene that does one thing. When you have a scene, it should be short. It should start late and end as soon as it can. Your story should really do that too. But in there should be an exchange of information. From the film to you, from one character to another character. There should be tension there. This character should maybe want to end on a slightly higher position than he's got and push this guy down. This guy might want to come up and push that guy down. They might reach an agreement, but it has to be an exchange of information, exchange of power. And this scene cannot achieve the same thing as another scene. I'll put a link below on how to write scenes. So you've got to figure out if your story is visual. Once it's visual, you've got to start beating it into shape, putting dots on paper, whatever you want to do. Use the card. There's a card system inside writerduet. Once you've got that, then start writing it. And there's heaps and heaps of things that show you how to do dialogue. I've got more videos. Everyone will show you how to do that. And the software will guide you. Don't be worried about your first draft. Vomit it on, as they say. Just get it on, get it on, get it on, get it on. It'll be 300 pages, 400 pages, could be 25 pages, could be 40 pages. If you feel you don't have enough story, go back and find a bigger question. Do another story. Do 3 screenplays before you show anybody. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. And if you're not finding joy, if this is not an addiction for you, find a thing that is an addiction for you. It's lovely to want to be a screenwriter, but you have to write to be a screenwriter. You have to love the art of writing to be a screenwriter. You have to pursue the craft. You have to constantly be looking at things. You have to, when you're watching TV, you have to go, I see what they did there. That was clever. I watched that movie. Oh, that is such a good film. Like Parasite is such a great film. Just the concept of Dad has a smell. And Dad doesn't have a smell, but there's something like a smell, like an aura, like something that says he's poor and he doesn't need to be here. And that's the idea of that smell. The smell is a mechanism that they used in Parasite to drive that the rich people can smell poverty, so the poor will never be rich. Those sorts of things. Until next time, guys, the book, there's a t-shirt which I find really fun. I don't make money from the t-shirt. My daughter designed it and she sells it on Redbubble. That's all for her. There's a t-shirt, the book. Anyone who's been subscribing, leaving comments. If you've seen me before and you've subscribed, resubscribe again, hit the bell, because YouTube every now and then just punishes everybody and wipes them away. These videos were getting a few thousand views. I think the last two have got like 40 views each. So it's fallen off a cliff. So that's just YouTube just refusing to show the videos. So they want people to comment and subscribe, right? If you'd be so kind, it'd be fantastic. If you give a video a thumbs up here or anywhere else, that tells the algorithm that this is the sort of stuff you like, and you'll be shown more of mine, more other writers, more creative stuff. So a thumbs up is a fantastic thing for my ego and for your viewing experience. Until next time, guys, keep writing. Bye.